Welcome to Empowerment Radio. My name is Dr. Friedemann, and I'm so glad that you decided to join me. Empowerment Radio is about giving you the insights, tools, and solutions to address some of the most challenging aspects of our daily lives. So sit back, relax, and empower yourself.
I always like to ask you how you're doing. Well, I'm sure some of you are still stuck at home in the situations. Others may feel there is a little bit more freedom looming around the corner. So I just hope that you're all doing well and that your loved ones are also safe. Thank you for tuning into the show today, which will be a little bit of a different topic than the topic around this pandemic, which I have been certainly talking about quite a bit. So today we want to go into another matter, also a matter that personally really fascinates me and interests me. And 10 years ago, both of my parents got ill. My dad just, was winding down. You had the feeling that he lost interest in life, and my mom was diagnosed with an incurable cancer of the liver. And during that time, I developed a really, really painful sciatic issue that I never had before. I mean, my sciatic pain was so bad that I couldn't even sit anymore. So I went to doctors and I went to chiropractics and I went to acupuncturists, and nothing really helped, didn't get better. And during that time, I had to fly to Germany to visit my parents. And it was so bad, this pain, that during the flight, I stood most of the times for the 11 hours simply because sitting was excruciating. Now, once I was there, I had one day where I just relaxed before I saw my parents. And during that day, it dawned on me that what I really had felt in that pain was the powerlessness of not being able to help my parents to, heal them, save them, or whatever it was, what deep inside I was hoping for. And also that feeling of, what if they really die and then I don't have roots anymore in where I grew up? So there was a fear and there was a sense of impotency. There was just a whole emotional part underneath that pain that I, due to the pain and due to my business, I hadn't really paid attention to. Now, as soon as I realized that, the pain decreased and it was less and less noticeable. And once I was with my parents and I could help a little bit in the house and I could have some good conversations with my father, especially at that time, the pain disappeared. It was almost like all that needed to happen was that shift internally in order for this to release. And isn't that true? I mean, have you ever noticed something like this? Have you ever noticed that you are dealing with a physical issue, maybe pain in your belly or in your chest, and you go from doctor to doctor and everyone says, well, we can't find anything, or maybe you just have to live with that. Or you have a chronic health issue and you do everything right and it still doesn't resolve. And again, you're stunned. You just don't know what's going on. But what if there is actually a deeper reason, an emotional, a trauma, an energetic reason that, if you were able to discover it, could help you to also make a significant shift? And this is what we're going to talk about, how we can find those deeper root causes of our emotional and also physical challenges through intuition. How can we tap into our intuition to heal ourselves? And for that, I have a fabulous guest invited, Wendie Coulter, who is a medical intuitive. She has a training program for people that want to also become medical intuitives. And she's also a master healer and a clairvoyant. So a lot going on her end. So I'm going to bring her right on. Thank you, Wendie, for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. What a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, so Wendie, I always ask my guests, how? how did you get into that, what you're doing right now? I mean, this is not necessarily like, yeah, of course I wanted to become a lawyer, or, something more traditional. I
Right.
mean, you fell into a very interesting path. How did that happen?
Oh, that's a long story, but I'll give you the highlights.
Cool.
Well, my opinion is that everybody is intuitive. And there's a lot of research on that, believe it or not. And there's a lot of ways to see it in our society if you look at it from that perspective. I was always an intuitive child, but again, I think all kids are intuitive to one degree or another. And I developed over time a sense of perception, intuitive perception, that I was lucky enough in my home family, with my parents, they didn't discourage it. A lot of people get very discouraged. They say, don't do that, don't talk about that kind of thing. My parents didn't understand it, but they didn't discourage me, which was nice. So I kind of grew up with this idea that my intuitive instincts were valid and often correct. And over time, I'll just give you the highlights. I'm sure we'll get into more of this later, but I became an energy healer later in my life. I didn't start out that way. I was in another field, and this was always kind of a hobby for me because I noticed that I could look at somebody and just get a sense of whether or not they were feeling well or not, just from the time I was very young.
Mhm.
Um, and as I developed as an energy healer, I noticed that I also had this visual perception ability where I was able to literally see into someone's body and also into their life history. And, I developed that. I took courses in different things and I studied a lot of different things. And I noticed that over time, when I was doing my energy healing work, that I was getting calls from local doctors and my colleagues were sending me their difficult cases because for some reason I was able to really perceive the whole story. And you said it perfectly in your introduction, and I really appreciate that because there's always an underlying reason or cause or story, if you will, in someone's physical imbalance. And that's fascinating to look at. And it brings a lot of insight for anyone, who wants to work with a medical intuitive who's qualified and trained in this sort of skill. Because it can
Mm.
give you what, frankly, Western medicine is not designed to do, which is, the why, other than the physical why, of why something occurred. And even then, not always, because as we know, Western medicine tends to look at the body as individual systems or individual parts, whereas a medical intuitive should look at the body as a whole, physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, etc. It's all works together. So that was the short
Well,
answer.
you were saying that's first of all, you were lucky. I mean, not only being sensitive and having disabilities, but also having parents that were actually supporting that, which doesn't necessarily happen, as you
That
said.
is true.
Uh, but what I'm wondering is like, when you're thinking about intuition, you mentioned everyone has it. Now you know that your intuition was strongly developed, or maybe you were more aware of it. But how do we know that we have intuition? What
Yeah.
is it, what you would say is like, well, here is probably a clear sign that you are also intuitive. What could people look for?
Well, this is a really great conversation because my opinion is that we use our intuition all the time. We just don't call it that. So when people say, I have a gut feeling or they have a
Mm.
hunch, and that's actually, as you know, in medicine, all the time, a good doctor or a medical doctor will have a hunch about something, follow up a hunch, and that is encouraged even though it's not understood. Um, that is an intuitive process. It's called claircognizance, clear knowing. Cognizance means knowing.
Yes.
Clair is French word meaning
Mhm.
clear, right? So that clear knowing is something that everybody seems to have. Uh, at some point in their lives, they just got an inkling or a hunch. We call it women's intuition, mother's intuition. Uh,
Man's intuition
Man,
exists as
thank you very
well.
much. I don't like using those words because it's exclusive and there's
Me
no
neither,
exclusive. It's
exactly.
ridiculous. So we know as a culture and as a society that when you have a hunch, if you follow it up, it's a good idea. It's a good idea to follow up a hunch, and that is claircognizance. Another intuitive, very, very common intuitive state is called clairsentience or clear feeling, which means that you can feel the emotions of others, or you feel the physical pain or distress of others. Well, anyone who calls themselves an empath is really using their clairsentience, which is an important skill because we need to have our favorite word, which is compassion. We need to have compassion for others, right? And empathy.
Yes, I tell you, sometimes it's really hard when I watch something like someone is at the dentist and gets a cavity drilled. I feel it exactly at the
Right.
same spot. It's
Right.
not very pleasant. But before, or after the break, we will talk about this more. But why is it that we talk ourselves out of it? It's
Well,
such an easy thing to have this fast gut feeling, and then we say, oh no, this is probably not true, it doesn't make any sense, and boom, we are not listening. Why?
that's, again, fabulous question. It's because we don't have a context in society for this experience.
Hmm.
Interestingly, everybody knows what a hunch is. Everybody knows how that feeling goes of compassion or getting that tooth drilled and like, right? We all know what this is, but it hasn't been discussed what that mechanism actually is. And the mechanism, if you will, is the practice or the experience of intuition and intuitive states. And, look, it's been stigmatized from for centuries, I think we could say. For many, many reasons, people have decided or felt that they couldn't trust those instincts, those intuitions. But again, because we understand it, and when I talk about it to, doctors and nurses and people in healthcare, they all get it. Uh, the question is, no one, it's not understood that it can be developed, put it that way. So it's
Right.
not really considered a skill or even a useful skill. Um, and that is not correct, simply. Intuition is a very powerful skill, and it can be used in healthcare beautifully, especially in this realm of medical intuition, which crosses with healthcare and wellness care, I should say.
Well, when we come back, we'll talk more about intuition and also how this is related then to the subconscious mind, how you can make your intuition or your awareness of your intuition stronger, and how you can use it to heal yourself. So stay tuned, we'll be right back. Hi, Dr. Friedemann here. Thank you for tuning into my YouTube channel. If you're interested in learning more about fear and anxiety, here you'll find guided meditations, webinars, and interviews with some of the most renowned experts in the field of empowerment. Delve into the over 230 videos and more to come every week.